Okay. I'm assuming this is my third broadcast. I'm testing this out. I have two microphones on. This microphone and this microphone. I wonder if I can hear myself twice. But anyways, it's just proving to myself I can hear myself. So obviously you're probably hearing me twice. Better turn that off. Now you're just gonna hear me once. I'm gonna keep the two cameras on me. Okay. My theory of everything. My theory of everything goes like this, okay? First, we're going to talk about God. Oh, no. First, we're talking about this, okay? What are we? What are we? Who are we? Who and what are we? Consciousness is an explorer. Like that, we don't know a lot about consciousness, okay? But I think my understanding of who I am, a spark, divine spark. I'm just going to write them out. Divine spark. A fractal aspect of, I don't even remember how it's worded, an intelligence. A fractal part, fractal portion of, fractal aspect of oneness, divine oneness. Now, this is not, well, I mean, these ideas are bridging multiple religions. This is kind of what's coming out of my mind from my study, right? Fractal portion of God, consciousness. And again, we don't know. There are many men that have had mystical experiences, and they became the founders of many religions. So I'm just looking for parallels in what I've learned in their descriptions. And a spark. You and me are a spark. We're a divine spark. We're a fractal aspect of divine oneness. We're an intelligence. We're a fractal portion of God consciousness, or of God's consciousness. A bunch of words, meaningless words. But to me, okay, I need to extend this out. Because we're an observer. But also a decision maker. A creator. Okay. Now, I have not studied specific religions a great deal, except the religion I grew up in. I'm not going to get into that. So this is just my ideas, all right? This is my personal, this is not associated with any religion specifically. These are just my thoughts, my understandings, all right? but I did grow up in a Christian background, so I'll probably most often, if I refer to religious writings, refer to the Bible. In the book of John, it states, "In the beginning." In the beginning, and I might misquote the Bible. Forgive me if I do. This is all from memory, and I'm not endorsing any at this moment. I'm not endorsing any specific religion or so forth. This is just my thoughts. Rory O'Dugan's thoughts. All right. In the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God. And the Word was God. Okay? This is important. Word. This is important. I mean, these 3 lines are important, right? Like, I have kind of been mulling over in my mind for years, like, what does that mean? What does that mean? And I'm going to describe what I think it means in part. What is a word? Okay, yeah, Christians just there's a very basic interpretation that I'm not going to go into depth on, but Christians say, well, the word is Jesus. Okay, I'm not specifically trying to go into any specific doctrines, all right? I'm just mulling ideas and philosophizing. What is a word? A word is an idea. What is another synonym for word? A word can evolve into multiple ideas, and multiple ideas, like a word encapsulates a single idea. Right? A word can encapsulate a single idea, such as this is a pen. Pen, that's a word, and this is an idea. What a pen is a set of words. So I'm going to put a set of words can become a concept. A pen, what it does, that's a concept. A pen writes, that's a whole concept. But a word, like if I say the Bible, that's a word that encapsulates not just a concept, but a story. History is his story, so I'm not going to write that word because history is just a set of stories from somebody's perspective. They don't say her story. Them chauvinists designing language. History is just his story. Male dominated. What? Anyways, it's just not going to get into feminism here or whatever. This is just philosophy. All right, just philosophy here, trying to discuss. So stories and plans. A set of ideas can become a plan. Now, is there anything? So a word or a set of words are ideas, concepts, stories, plans. All these can be and I'm even going to delve into evolution in terms of my thought of if evolution. I'm gonna explore the possibility of evolution being true. Of I'm gonna explore the possibility of both evolution and God being true. I'm not going to describe why or how I'm getting there, but think of it this way: the material world evolved the animal kingdom? Okay, that's where I'm going to start. I'm going to start with the discussion of the animal kingdom, because you have, well, where did outer space, where did the stars, where did the planets, where did water, where did all that start? I'm not going that far back in evolution. There are people that, you got many different views of that, but I'm just starting with the animal kingdom. Even in the biblical story, there was a progression, right? The animal kingdom was created on, what was it, day 4 or 5, maybe day 3. I'm not a Bible scholar. Okay, so I'm going to kind of skip ahead to there. The animal kingdom. Do animals know they exist? Do animals have consciousness? We are a consciousness. Okay, a consciousness, but a certain. See, here's the thing. Me and you, we are human beings. And we are above the animal kingdom. Okay, the animal kingdom is down here, and then there's like, it progresses all the way down to the material world of rocks. Rocks and stones. Progresses up to the various scales of the animal kingdom, and above the animal kingdom, the highest, and I would say above us, is God. So I believe as an intelligence, as a consciousness, there are levels of intelligence and levels of consciousness, right? Starting with the material world, I believe the rocks, the stones, all of that has a degree of consciousness, a degree of intelligence. Everything is potentially a fractal aspect of divine oneness. But the level of self-aware, we are self-aware. Okay, this self-awareness is one of the things that distinguishes us from the animal kingdom, because our level of self, I mean, like an animal is self-aware if they're having an injury. If a lion has an injury to his paw, he'll lick his paw. So he's self-aware of his body, right? But is he self-aware that he's a lion? To what degree that's true, I couldn't say, because we can't communicate with lions. But there's still something that we have that's more, all right? Because our ability to be this observer, we're able to observe ourselves at varying degrees of separation from our physical self, okay? So there are degrees of consciousness, of our consciousness. We experience multiple degrees of consciousness. Okay, now this is getting back to the animal kingdom, because the first degree of consciousness, there might be lower, there might be, but the first one that that really, I mean, the first one that I know how to experience is we experience our mortal body, our mortal animal body. I call it the mortal animal body because I'm relating it to the animal kingdom. And I'm just going to go with assuming that animals are not self-aware. Okay. No awareness of self. So we experience multiple degrees of consciousness, the mortal animal body. Now, what do I mean by that? I really, really learned this concept from a quote, and I wish I had recorded it. I haven't found it yet again. But it was a quote from, what's her name? Uh, Her name escapes me at the moment. I'm forgetting her name, her name, her name, her name. She was the woman in the 1900s, Helen Keller, I believe is. So I heard this quote from Helen Keller describing, or at least the person sharing the quote was describing about what it meant to be human, what it meant to be a human being, having a human experience. And man, I wish I had the quote. I'm still searching for it. Haven't found it on the internet. But Helen Keller was in this world. Helen Keller, she herself, she might not have used these words, but the way this quote, she was describing her life before she learned language. Okay, she lived an animal experience, and the distinguishing aspect of that was that she had no language. Okay, she was blind and deaf and dumb. And nobody knew it was possible to teach her language, so nobody tried. No. I don't know if I just got cut off. Start over here. Yeah, my friend. I'm not sure if I'm still live here, right? Am I back? Okay, we're back. Sorry for the disruption. Totally new technology. Okay, that was a disruption. And let me get back to it. Okay, so Helen Keller lived an animal experience. She didn't have language. That's where I left off. Okay, that's distracting. It's really very, very difficult to explain what life is like without language. Watch whatever movies exist about Helen Keller's life. Recently, I watched, it was probably made 30, 40 years ago. It was an older movie about Helen Keller's life and what her life was like before she learned language, while she was learning language, and after she learned language. Like, well, that when anyways, and then so I watched that movie and then I heard this quote. And her quote basically, to me, my interpretation of her quote about herself was like, before I learned language, I didn't exist. I didn't experience what it meant to be a human being. I didn't experience life as a human being. So how did she experience life? Like what, how can you not, how can a person not experience life as a human being? She experienced it as an animal. Here's what she did. She ate, she slept, she had tactile feel, she felt. That's physical sensations, physical and emotional. She wandered, but she had no context to any of her experiences. Context. That's another thing that words provide, because context and story are interrelated. Okay? She had no context to her experiences. She would fumble around. She would fumble around, and they would put her hands on food, and she would eat it. Her brain might have, and her tongue might have said, oh, these are different flavors. But she didn't care. She had no context of, oh, this is an apple. Oh, this is a pear. This is bread. It was just, she put it in her mouth, and if it tasted good, she ate it. She had no experience, no context for what she was eating. She had no context for food. It was just like, I need this. My body needs it. Oh, and she would just gobble it up. When she was done, she was done. When she was tired, she'd lay down and sleep. When she was fumbling around and she felt another person, she didn't experience that as another person. She had no context, no idea what it was. It was something alive, Maybe it had similarities to her. Oh, you have an arm. You have an arm. I have an arm. She had no context for mother, father. It was just another being, a live being. You know. And literally, kind of, what would she do? Well, if it was in her way, she'd push it out of her way. If she wanted something from it, she'd claw at it. She'd just do whatever. If she was hungry or whatever. and she had these routines and habits. You know, if she had like a doll or something, and if she didn't know where it was, she'd just get angry, and they'd like give her like and all they did was they sat there trying to figure out the whole entire, like her whole family was like, whoa, here she comes. Is she in a good mood? If she's in a good mood, we can ignore her, which was rare. And if she's in a bad mood, we got to figure out what she wants and give it to her. And so they'd shove stuff at her and shove stuff. If it was food, they'd shove food at her. And if that satisfied her, then good. If it didn't, oh, then give her blanket, give her stuffed animal, do whatever to just get her to stop being frantic. And so she literally was like this caged animal that they just walked on tiptoes around, trying not to upset, because they had no idea how she was going to act, because she was just an animal. And anyways, in her quote, she almost explicitly states she didn't have experience what it meant to be a human being. So then there was a process of her learning language. And when like the movie, you know, maybe this is true, maybe it's even a fraction of a portrayal of truth, but the movie portrays the first time she learned a word and knew that she had learned a word, her whole life changed. Her experience changed. I can't remember what they portrayed her first word at, but it was something like water. Anyways, then, and in her quote, she said, then when I knew language, I became a human being because I began to have experiences of being a human being. So this is where I draw a lot of my conclusions here, is from Helen Keller's example, right? So our second, after our mortal animal experience, we have our degree of consciousness of ideas, words, or our mental experience. I mean, our mental body, our mental capacity. This is a second. It's a form of our consciousness, but it's on top of. I have young children. I have 10 children, and right now the youngest two are twins, and they don't know language. At some point, they're going to learn language. They're going to learn it because, unlike Helen Keller, they can see and they can hear. And how do children learn language? Through mimicking, right? But like, how does the brain work? How does the human brain work? This is my exploration into my understanding. This is not scientific fact. But I've been kind of looking into like how AI works, right? You have these kind of represent neurons. Yeah. Well, first off, you have inputs, your 5 senses. So sight, hearing, sound, touch, smell. Okay, these are inputs into your brain. Okay. And your brain is hundreds of millions, trillions, I don't know, neurons. So I'm just going to simplify it by Neurons. I don't know how to pronounce, spell that. And what happens is that in the beginning, and you can kind of see it when a baby is born, it starts in the womb, okay, this process. But especially when a baby is born and they open their eyes for the first time, that's like this sense of sight. Boom, it gets activated and starts sending signals. So I'm just gonna use one set. I'm gonna use sight. And it starts sending signals. Sometimes those signals go nowhere. Sometimes it's, like baby opens his eyes and it's a signal. And it literally, the eyes translate everything into an electric magnetic, well, an electric signal. Literally, your eyes translate everything into an electric signal, and these electric signals get sent into the brain. And these neurons start receiving these signals, and sometimes the same signal is received, well, not sometimes, I mean, I'm not a neuroscientist, but for the most part, it's not just one cell, it's like an area. I don't know how this works. I'm not a neuroscientist, but it's like somehow, and some neurons just say whatever, and they do nothing. They say whatever, and they're like, that's not something I care about. That's not something I care about. And some neurons, they say, you know what? I think you should handle this. You take this data. No, you take, like, this is like, I'm just ignoring it. No, you take it. No, you take it. And boom, like, oh, you see what I see? You see what I see? And then they're like, yeah, you see what I see. Oh, you see what I see too? Oh, we're starting to see the pattern. I'm doing there's people that explain how AI works. Like I've watched videos where people explain how AI technology works and how that relates to the human brain. Because AI technology, they're literally mimicking how the brain works. I'm doing a terrible job of explaining this, but this is my just rough understanding. Our brains are pattern recognition seeking instruments at the very basest level, seeking pattern recognition. And so again, they open their eyes and it's a continuous feed that the eyes receive. It's a continuous feed. So the eyes, boom, 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 they're building more connections and more connections. And then you have like, this is your brain. Then you have a part of your brain that starts specializing. So, you have in the beginning, you have little pockets of like stuff that's like working on, recognizing the patterns. And how I know for a fact this whole visual is related to our ability to see, or our minds to understand what we see. I watched some I don't know if I would call it a documentary, but some videos where the input, all our brain needs is an input. Okay, they took a camera, mounted it on someone's head with like a hat, and then they took and programmed the camera to send a signal. And I don't know how they sparsed it out, but it sent a signal into something that someone could put on their tongue. And they gave these devices to blind people, and they're probably still studying this. And they were able to put it on their tongue and obviously experience the tongue is an input. It's different than our eyes. Their eyes, these blind people, their eyes didn't work, but they put it on their tongue. And these blind people began to experience sight for the first time. Their brains began to receive a signal of sight. And over time, they developed a form of vision. And they were able to how can one describe what it's like to see with one's tongue? I don't know how to describe that. I haven't experienced it. But anyways, I just remember watching these blind people like walking around, and they were able to like, hey, there's an object there. I don't want to walk into it. Like they began to have spatial awareness. So our brains are pattern recognition seeking instruments at its core, right? And here's context. We have patterns. Out of ideas and concept, patterns emerge. Patterns are an emergent phenomenon. Patterns are an emergent phenomenon, okay? Color, yeah. Oh man, I don't know how, like, this is my theory of everything. So I'm just going to keep going. Like, I'm starting from this. I'm going to get into as much detail as I can. Patterns emerge. Patterns are an emergent phenomenon. So anyways, but then the brain starts to specialize. And so then you got like most of the brain probably ignoring all and then you have one part of the brain that's like, I'm great at this. I'm really good at this visual stuff. Nobody else worry about it. Like, I mean, yeah, your visual activates other stuff, but in terms of what receives the signal, like, yeah, your visual, what you see is going to send out its own signals out into the brain, but you have the sight, and then you have the visual cortex. And maybe it's like, that's, I don't know the biology of it, but the visual cortex has this capacity, right? But like other parts of the brain, I believe in brain plasticity. Brain plasticity is that any part of the brain can take over and participate or function as any other part of the brain. That's my personal belief. That may be somewhat scientific, somewhat unscientific, but I believe in brain plasticity. So there's probably some parts of the brain that are super specialized and only they can do that, like whatever. But in terms of the majority, maybe 90%, I don't know, 70%, 80%, like the brain has this plasticity to where it can change. So anyways, as it begins, the neurons receive the data, and if two neurons receive the data and they like start communicating with each other, they start forming connections, neural connections. Okay, and what is this? What is the signal? What is the signal? Green, in this case. Color. Received a signal of green. Oh, confirm. Yes, green. Green. I see green. Oh, I see green. Nope. No green. No green. This neuron's like, I don't know. I've never seen green. Don't know what you're talking about. But then, because it sees green again, so then you got like over here, you got another signal, secondary signal, green again, and then they connect to there, and it's like, oh, you saw green? We saw green yesterday, or a minute ago, or a second ago. Boom, confirmation. So this signal, oh, and then let's say this signal got sent to him too, and he's like, I saw green twice. He's like, I saw green. Oh, and this guy saw green too. This guy saw green, and he's like, green, I'm starting to specialize. This guy right here, he's like, I'm starting to specialize. I see green. I can recognize green because he's seen green. And this guy, he's never seen green. And well, I'm just going to start ignoring his signals because he don't know what he's talking about, because I got three connections that are seeing green. And then he starts collecting. This neuron starts collecting, and he starts specializing. And you start having more and more of these neurons in your brain that start specializing, and they start ignoring all the no green guys. They ignore, and they focus in like green. Anybody see green? Anybody see green? You come to me. I can recognize it. I'll tell you if it's green. So this is my rudimentary explanation of the brain recognizing the color green. Why is that? That's an animal experience, okay? That's an animal mortal body experience, is experiencing green. So let's take each one of these guys is a specialized green neuron. Okay. And then you have a whole bunch of specialized maybe I should choose a different example. No, okay. So we're talking about like seeing a leaf. It's really hard. Like, okay, what's a rudimentary? What's a very rudimentary thing? I'm going here to rudimentary mortal and like hunger. We'll go with hunger. Does a baby experience hunger? Yeah. Does a fetus experience hunger? No. Not until the umbilical cord is separated does a baby experience hunger. So in the womb, they don't have any brain activity around feeling hungry because they're constantly receiving nourishment. They receive everything they need without any action on their own. And then they start feeling hunger. They cry. They cry. They cry when they're hungry. Okay? So hunger. And then you have the sense of taste. This is a terrible one too. What I want to get to is just that it layers, because what's a really easy way of saying how things layer? So like, let's go back to sight. What's a color? I'm gonna not necessarily try and there are layers, okay, of patterns. Because you take green, I'm just gonna go back to green, and what I was thinking of is like a leaf, and you have the texture. And the brain, you have these neurons that learn to recognize the texture of a leaf. The concept of a leaf, the idea of a leaf is a combination of multiple. In order to recognize the idea of a leaf, it's a combination of multiple patterns. You got its color, let's just say green, its texture, its shape, its design, because a leaf has a specific design, its taste. Leaves have a taste. Trust me, babies put everything in their mouth. If I'm trying to teach my little 7-month-old about what a leaf is, and I give it to him, he looks at it and then he puts it in his mouth. He might not even look at it first. First thing babies learn to do to try and create connections is put things in their mouth. All these are neurons that have come to specialize in these things. Again, rudimentary explanation. They specialize. Okay? Specialize in taste, specialize in design, shape, texture. And then, and again, the first time I give my baby a leaf, he's going to taste it. He's going to feel it in his hands, and he might look at it. And it's repeated. Like, he's going to need multiple experiences with a leaf to slowly build up these specialized neurons, and then slowly he's going to start putting them together, because when he puts it in his mouth and he tastes it, he might link to its he might all of a sudden, because he's feeling it in his hand, and then there's the texture in his mouth, there's the texture and the taste. Whenever I put it in my mouth, it's pretty consistent. These things are related. And then, because they happen concurrently. He tastes it, and he feels its texture in his hand and in his mouth. And then he takes it out and looks at it. Oh, he sees that it's green. He sees that it's green. Oh, later on, he'll see that it's got a shape to it. Like, anyways, I'm gonna kind of I'm gonna get to my point. How about I do that? How about I stop being a windbag and get to my point? What's your point, Rory? I'll tell you what my point is. There are levels of patterns, okay? Level 1 pattern, level 2 pattern, level 3, 4, 5, 6, and they get more complex, right? Because to see green is a very simple thing. You just look and your brain's like, that's green. It's your brain is recognizing that frequency of light. That's what it's recognizing, right? Because the frequency of light that is green, that we call green, hits the eyes, and that gets translated into an electric signal, and then that hits your neurons, and your neurons say, we recognize that as being green. And again, I'm using a word, and that's way up here, like maybe, and that's a word. Well, let's just skip, like 20, 21, skip, 20, 30. And you have stories. You have words. Just if any of you have had a child and you've just watched them, especially, a mother, when you watch your child born, you watch them learn bit by bit by bit by bit by bit. And this goes on well into your teens. Like when your brain is, fully developed, is really when your brain hits some kind of ceiling as like, I don't think there's any layer above this of patterns. But I don't think that's set in stone, right? I believe in the brain plasticity. So like in levels of patterns, levels of complexity. Because when it gets up here, your brain recognizes a color, recognizes a texture, and then it starts combining how patterns are related, one pattern being related to another pattern. You get to words, right? Helen Keller had the capacity, the brain capacity to learn words, but her brain lacked the inputs that it could then chew on. Our brain chews on inputs and finds meaning in them. It finds meaning in them by finding how they're related and connected, okay? And by like creating those connections of like, this is related to this. Like I said, the concurrency of the taste and the texture when you put something in your mouth is an example of that. Your brain in the beginning doesn't know it's related, but over time, when something happens together, your brain's like, whoa, every time I put this in my mouth, I experience them at the same time. But they're two different experiences, but they're concurrent. The leaf is both green, or has a taste and a texture, whatever. So my point of this, what's my point? Is that we learn to recognize patterns. We have a pattern like our brains are bigger than animals. Okay? So, this scale of complexity of pattern recognition. Let's say animals can go to 1 to 20. animal. And then 1 to like 100 is human. I'm making these up. Like, I'm making it up. Because animals can recognize color. Well, some animals don't see color. So that's a bad example. Animals can taste, animals can see, animals can make sense of the world, but their ability to evaluate and make connections, in terms of the level of complexity, is limited compared to us humans. Okay. And I think God's is a level above ours. Maybe God's 1 to infinite. I don't know. Because we don't understand God's. Let me point that over there. Infinite. Like, we don't really know. In terms of the material world, we can't put any limits on God. We can explore our own limitations. What's another level or form of our experience? Our emotions. Our emotions are I'm still trying to understand emotions, but they seem to be both an input and an output. An input because when you feel happy, you can't necessarily describe where that happiness is coming from, but you can express that happiness and other people can feel it. Okay, so it's an input because your brain and your body is like recognizing this feeling coming from your body, and then you can also express it. But it's something that we experience that's unique. It could be a part of our animal mortal body, but I'm gonna just say I'm gonna assume it's something separate, but it's part of what it means to be a human. Then we have this thing that's like an idea generator. It's this part of our brain that's just like always talking. And it's the part of the brain the talker, the analyzer. And he's schizophrenic because there seems to be multiple of that guy. Because you got the guy that's like upbeat and optimistic, and then you got the pessimistic, guy, and then you got the guy that's funny, and and then you got the guy that's like gross. Anyways, this idea generator, this talker. I mean, people who meditate. I'm not a great meditator, but they talk about like putting that guy put to sleep. And for me, being that I don't meditate, I'm not very good at it. That seems very difficult. Like when I try and meditate, that guy, he just doesn't shut up. And then when he does shut up, like something else is happening because there's this concept, visual dreamer. And they might be the same. They might be the same. They might be different. But he'll start talking. And then this guy takes over. And it's like all of a sudden I have this imagined experience. Like this guy, the talker, he's analyzing like, oh, dude, you're late for work. You're late. Your boss is gonna be mad at you. And then all of a sudden, this guy takes over, and he's like, yeah, you're gonna show up, and this is what's gonna happen. He's trying to predict he's a future predictor. And then you have the observer. I'll call him the decision maker. Because it's true. This guy can talk, and this guy can predict the future, and this guy's going to be like, based on this guy's future prediction, I'm going to analyze it, and I think we could do this. We could make up this excuse, or we could say this to the boss to try and, the boss is going to be mad, and that's not good for us. So we need to tell the boss how bad traffic was, or no, we just need to show up with a gift for the boss, and he's coming up he's the idea generator. And this guy is like, because of their activity, this guy is feeling nervous, and he's paying attention to what's going on, and especially this guy, he catches on to what you're predicting in the future, and he says, that's dangerous. If you lose your job, you've told me before that that's a bad thing. And he starts to get nervous. That's a bad thing. And he starts sending out his signals. And and these might all be subsets. These are all subsets of this mental experience. Probably, right? Anyways, but everything I'm talking about here, everything I'm saying is predicated on your ability as a human being to experience language. Getting back to Helen Keller. Everything your experience as a human being is created out of language. Okay? Because if you didn't have language, you would be like Helen Keller. You'd have no context. No context for deeper patterns. Language is what allows us to take the patterns above what the animals can do, and it allows us to take those patterns. Like language, words take and encapsulate ideas, and then you can have a meta idea. What do I mean by a meta idea? Let's take a simple word that has layers to it, right? Not just various definitions. Words can have various definitions, but then when you take a word and you put it in a sentence, that word has new meaning and new power. And then we take that sentence and you combine it into a paragraph. That word takes on new meaning. And when that paragraph is combined into a whole book, you can have, so like, for example, the word Google it. If I were to walk into a 19th century bar from 1901 and I was to say, hey, is that, if you don't know something, just Google it. That word is going to be meaningless. And then if I try and explain it, and these people from 1900 are like, what do you mean if I don't know something, I should Google it? You're having a conversation and someone asks you a question, you're like, I don't know, but I could figure it out if I Google it. And they're like, and let's say you didn't know you were in 1900. You were just transported there magically. You're having this conversation. So let me backtrack. You're transported magically back to the 1900s, 1901, and you're in a bar, and you're like trying to get home, but you don't even know. So you're lost, and you're talking to this guy, and you're like, yeah, man, I'm trying to figure out how to get home. I need to, but Google, and you have your phone with you, and you're like, Google Maps isn't working. So I put in my address, and like, there must not be any internet here. And they're like, internet? Google? What are you talking about? And you start explaining, well, yeah, the internet, it's like my phone here. And they're like, what are you talking about your phone? And you hand it to them, and the battery's dead. And so like, there's like, this is just like a heavy, funny looking rock. Like, what are you talking about? Like, no, it's a phone. If I just charge it, and here, like, you're using all these words that are like up here at level 100, but in the 1900s, they're still at like 90. because their language hasn't evolved. Like the experience of what it means to be a human being evolves with our language. As our language grows, as word our or because our like they happen concurrently. Our experiences evolve with our language, but language is essential for the evolution of our experience. If Helen Keller was, let's say she was transported in her pre-life of not of knowing language, so she didn't know language, and then she was transported to this year, 2023, and you gave her a phone, and it's like, dude, Helen, and you start talking to her, yeah, she can't hear you, but you're like, oh, okay, but she might not have sight or sound, but I mean, she can feel. So here's this thing, here's this phone. Let's give her a keyboard and a computer, like, because of the phone, like she has no idea because she can't see, like she's touching stuff and meaningless to her. But then a keyboard, right? Like, oh, she can it. Here's a keyboard. She can feel the up and down of the keyboard. It's all meaningless junk. But Helen Keller, when she learned words, I'm not sure if she learned Braille. I don't know if Braille existed at the time, but she learned words, okay? And it wasn't until she learned words that she could experience humanity and communicate with other people and all that jazz. So back to this. This is why I've taken so long to explain this, because I want to go back to the beginning. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So let's take it from an evolutionary standpoint. What if this being that we call God, I'm going to start with the first Adam, the first man that was a man. Okay, so you take evolution. The first man that was a man and not an animal would be the first man that had language, whose grunt started to take on meaning. In the beginning was the Word. So was there history? Did that man, all his progenitors before that, before he learned his first word, the first man to learn the first word, I'm going to call him Adam, before he existed, was there history? Did history exist? Were there any stories, ideas? No. He was like Helen Keller. So at some point, if evolution is true, at some point there was a human, I'm going to call him a human being. Maybe he was a Neanderthal who became a human being, and he was the first one. And what was the first thing that made him a human being? Was his experience of language. So the Word, in the beginning was the Word. That was the beginning of humanity. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So like just imagining this Neanderthal. And in the Bible, what is one of the first activities that Adam does? He names everything. Adam, in the Bible, after he's created, gives everything a name. He begins conceptualizing and giving context to the world because he just starts naming stuff. That's a bear. Why? I got to name it something. It's got to have a name. I'm going to call it a bear. That's a rock. And he was probably talking to Eve. And he probably came to Eve and was like, Eve, rock. Grunting at her, rock. He named everything. I mean, as the story goes, he gave everything a name, but somebody had to be there to listen. That had to be Eve. So Eve was the receptor, the receiver. I only got 15 more minutes before I have to leave this room. Eve was the receptor. Okay, so there was a man, could have been a woman, whatever, it doesn't really matter, man or woman. There was a human who first learned about words, and he started naming everything, and he gave name to everything. And when everything has a name, you can start telling stories about it. This rock, I had the rock and I hit the bear over the head. The bear was attacking me, right? Bear, rock. And then she got the idea, and then the word attack was created, right? Like, like words evolved. I don't know how words evolved, but I'm imagining if evolution is real, words had to evolve through some kind of process of like trying to get across what happened. You're trying to tell stories, and so you need new words to describe your experiences, but you need somebody else to understand it. So the bear attacked you and you hit it with a rock, you demonstrated on Eve, and you're like trying to attack her, and you're like, no, this is the bear. I'm the bear. You're me. And you pick up the rock, and then don't actually hit me. I don't know. I'm being silly. But in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now here's from a spiritual perspective of, okay, forget about evolution. Not necessarily. Like, let's go back to assume a creator of this world exists. Let's go with that assumption. This could be just as true. And I'm going to assume that God became God when that's too, like, okay, let's just talk about this mortal world that we're living in. In the beginning was the Word. I'm not going to talk about the beginning of how God came to be. Maybe that's sacrilegious. I don't know. But I'm not going to go there because that's like indescribable. But in the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. Because I think this is describing our mortal experience. This describes our world. It could be describing evolution, but it could also be describing creation, because in the beginning was the Word. The Word was an idea. The Word was a plan. In the beginning, God had an idea to make a world, to create a human race. And his idea was with him. He had it, whatever that means. And the Word was God. The idea was God because he followed his own plan. He followed his own design. That's another one here. Design. In the beginning was the design, the idea, the plan. And the design was with God. It was his design. And the design was God, because in God, all of God's actions and activities, he followed his own plans, his own ideas, and his own design. And here's the thing. Why do I say a divine spark, a fractal aspect of divinity? Because we have the same capacity. In any beginning, it starts with an idea, a design, a concept, a plan. And if it's ours, and being that we have the power to take ideas and concepts that are only ideas and concepts, and we have the ability to bring them into the world, and that sort of makes us like God. I mean, take the world around you. Cars, for example. Did God create cars? Did God design cars? If we're a fractal aspect of God, or and God created us, like, yeah, but our divinity allowed us to create cars. How did we create cars? Someone came up with an idea, a concept, and a design, and then made a plan. We'll call them, was it Ford? he came up with an idea, a concept of a car, and it was his idea, and the idea was God in as much as he followed his own plan to create a car. That was his God. Because he followed his own plan. So we are creators. Or you could say co-creators. We're either creators or co-creators. Well, we're always co-creators because we're creating with each other. Right. So I'm going to have to end this live stream. But my point is, when we don't engage in creation, when someone else, because what it comes down to also, other people, well, some sheep, there's levels in life to your experience. There are sheep, there are shepherds, there are wolves, there are lions. Each one of these is an archetype. So not even other people, just people, archetypes. For what and how we live and what it means to be a human being. Okay, there are archetypes for what and how we live and what it means to be a human being. Sheep. There are sheep, there are shepherds, there are wolves, there are lions, and this is not all of them. There are heroes, there are villains, there are victims. Sometimes these overlap. Sometimes a sheep is a victim. Sometimes the wolf is a villain. Sometimes the lion is a hero. So they overlap. And this is not all of them. But what I want to dive into on my next live stream is this right here. What does it mean to be a human being? Like, how do you actively apply useful information into your life? Is you analyze what archetypes. An archetype is a meta idea concept. All right, it's a meta concept because an archetype, I'm going to go into the definition of an archetype. An NPC, right? NPC and sheep, like the idea of living life as an NPC is kind of a modern one, right? But it's very similar to a sheep, a zombie. That's a new one. It's a new archetype that has similarities to that, but also differences because there's a destructive nature to zombies. Worker bee. That's another one. Anyways, so in my next live stream, I'm going to dive into this right here. Our world, what it means to be you, what your life experience is primarily defined by and archetypes are characters. When you that's the meta, that's the definition. But then Hercules, for example, is a specific character embodying an archetype. All right, and he's a specific character with his own flaws, his own strengths. So these two are related. And here's the thing: you are living out an archetype through a character that you give your name. One of the proofs of this is think about the Bible. How many times did God give men a new name when he wanted them to evolve into being a new person? So we have the ability to take on new characters, to become new characters. You don't have to change your name, but that's also like becoming a new character can be symbolized. Evolving into a new person can be symbolized by taking on a new name. All right, I've run out of time. So this is, again, my name is Rory O'Dugan, and I am just trying to explain to myself and maybe to my children, someday they'll see this, why Dad did what he did. I'm 39 years old. It's the year 2023. Like, why the heck did Dad do what he did? They might not understand what I've been doing for the last couple of years. Trying to understand my life is one of the main things. And this is kind of my conclusion after 2 years of study and thinking and analyzing. And what's my purpose is I'm sitting here thinking, because I wasn't satisfied with who I was before, with who I was for the first 37 years of my life. I was unsatisfied. I was not content. So in seeking a newness of life, I have discovered this is really what I'm after, right here, right here. But it's taken me learning a whole lot of junk that I don't think is necessary, because this is all that's necessary. But it's been fun. No regrets, no regrets. So with that, I sign off. And to my children, I love you. To every single one of them, I have 10. I love you all. And this is a little time capsule into your father's mind. So signing off.